Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. So I haven't uploaded anything for the past 3 to 4 weeks ever since my last video, and I think that might give you the impression that I have not been playing or enjoying the games that I've been traditionally covering on this channel. And that's actually the exact opposite of what's been happening. I've been playing Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, Honkai Star Rail more so at this point than at any other point in the past 4 years ever since I started playing Genshin. Of course, in the first 2 years of Genshin, it was only Genshin Impact, so it's kind of hard to compare, but I think right now I'm actually enjoying Hoyoverse games more so than at any other point since I started Genshin. If you've been keeping up with my community posts, it's pretty obvious that Natlan is my favorite region. I think it has the best balance between like the main story versus world exploration versus world quests versus any of the other regions. With Fontaine, I think I kind of fell off because at that point, even though the world exploration was still as good as the previous regions, or at least it kept to the same standard, and the story was excellent, the fact that we had so little quality of life and so little improvement for Genshin Impact in general kind of came to head for me during Fontaine. So it kind of colored my whole view of the entire region. And as for the story, my focus was mainly on Farina, whereas every single other character wasn't nearly as interesting in my opinion. So my interest in Fontaine was very focused and very narrow, which was why I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as Sumeru. But with Sumeru, even though I really enjoyed the main story, the world exploration was too much focused on the desert side of things, and the puzzles were a bit more dumbed down compared to Inazuma. Inazuma, of course, I started my channel out complaining about the main story, so I don't really need to explain that. As a whole, I feel like Natlan has brought a better balance to like the game between like quality of life adjustments to like world exploration with a new Pokemon mechanics. Basically what I'm saying is that it does feel different to compared to the other regions. I feel like the water exploration in Fontaine was a bit too gimmicky, but for some reason it doesn't feel that way for me in Natlan. So basically what I'm saying is that I finished like all the world quests, all the tribal quests. I finished maybe 50 to 60% of the world exploration in Natlan, and that's more like playtime in Genshin than I have done since the beginning of Sumeru. So I'm not losing interest in Genshin Impact. In fact, this is the most interested I've been in Genshin for a very, very long time. Zenless Zone Zero, I've also talked about during my live streams that I don't really care that much about them removing TVs from the main story. It does have its own problems, which hopefully I'll talk about one day. But I feel like other people have like already talked about that better than I have. So if you just search like TV mode 1.2, Zenless, you'll get all the opinions that I would say anyways. I don't really feel like I need to say too much about it, but personally, I feel like 1.2 story was concise, to the point, and very much enjoyable because of how cinematic it was. I just hope in the future they add more gameplay outside of just like combat, right? I feel like what they did with the motocross section of the game, maybe they can turn that into something more full-fledged. I feel like every single patch should have something like that to replace what TV mode should have been, which is just like world exploration outside, world exploration gameplay, or the equivalent of that, aside from just combat. Because right now the gameplay in Zenless when it comes to the story is just dialogue, 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 cinematic, combat for 5 minutes, and then dialogue, 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 and then combat for 5 minutes. I feel like every single other game has like a better balance, or like for Genshin Impact, right? Whether you're interested in world exploration or combat, there's always something else to do. With Zenless Zone Zero, it's like there's only just combat, and if you don't do combat, then it's arcade mode, right? I feel like arcade mode was probably the replacement for the TV mode when it comes to what you're actually doing in the game outside of combat, but it's still not like a one-to-one replacement, because when it comes to the storytelling, right, you're not doing anything except combat. So that is still the case right now without the TV mode. Maybe they don't need to add anything more to it. Personally, I'm already so used to Hoyoverse storytelling that it doesn't bother me that the story mode is basically just a visual novel with some combat mixed in. And it's very easy combat as well, even if you're on challenge mode, because of course this is a Hoyoverse game. I did have a tough time on the hard mode with the last boss in 1.2, to be honest. Like I was playing with, I was playing with a Nekomata team with, and even then I was still having a bit of trouble defeating him with Caesar. Actually, no, that's not true. I didn't use Caesar. That was why I'm having so much trouble. I was getting like three-shotted. So yeah, the combat is great in Zenless. I've been doing all of the events. I've already finished the main event. I finished all the critical node to S rank. I've done the new mode, the new survival mode. I've done everything in Zenless except for like one or two exploration missions. And again, the TV mode being removed doesn't really bother me that much. I was one of the main supporters of the TV mode when the game first came out, and I still feel like it has a place, and it does have a place. It's going to be only in events and in side content now, which is not like the worst thing in the world. It's just unfortunate that because the main characters involvement in the main story is so tied to the TV that it doesn't really make sense for them not to have the TV mode. So maybe in the future they could just like make you play as a 3D Bang Boo model full on instead of just you playing as the agents, because the Bang Boo is really how you interact with the story as the main characters. And unlike Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact, the main characters don't really have a gameplay purpose besides just, it's the vehicle through which you see the story. It's kind of like Honkai Impact Third. A lot of things in Zenless are like more like Honkai Impact Third, but I'm getting a bit sidetracked. Basically, what I'm saying is that I have been doing so much of like all the content in the Hoyoverse games except for Honkai Impact Third. HSR, I'm maybe like 70% of the way through the main event, and I've done everything else in the game when it comes to in-game content. I've done almost everything in Zenless Zone Zero. I've done so much of Genshin Impact that I have not done since the beginning of Sumeru. Why am I not making any content? That is the real question, isn't it? Why am I not making content? And there's two main reasons for that. The first reason, actually, there's like three reasons, but the first reason is that I'm just lazy. Let's be honest. I'm a lazy person. I have not been making any content because I'm just lazy. But the second reason, aside from that, is probably a bit more important because I've always been lazy, right? Even when I was making more content, I've always been lazy. But now I'm also lazy, and there is also so much more gameplay to like Hoyoverse games and the big budget gacha games, as I like to call them, the big budget Genshin like gacha games, which I feel like Zenless Zone Zero and Honkai Star are not really that similar to, but they do fit into this trend of like big budget, fully 3D model gacha games that are following in the trend of Genshin Impact. And there are so many of these games now, not just the Hoyoverse games, but you have like Wuthering Waves, there's Neverness to Everness coming up, and there's like Azure Pomelia, all these gacha games that have big, high production values to them. And they're all following the same cycle of like every 6 weeks we get a new patch. Sometimes it's 7 weeks, sometimes it's 5 weeks, but you know what I mean, right? It's the same cycle. It's the same two banners, it's the same 50-50. It's mostly going to be 80 pity or 90 pity. It's all the same shit when it comes to the progression. And there are so many of these games now that you can't realistically play all of them at the same time and also create content for them. It's too hard. It's too much trouble. It's too much work. And you just don't have the time, even if you wanted to. You can't play all of these games, which is why I have dropped Wuthering Waves, I've dropped Arc Knights. I'm basically just focusing on the three main Hoyoverse games that I am enjoying right now, and that is just my personal preference, right? Wuthering Waves, I actually enjoyed. I've finished all of the holograms up to the highest difficulty, which is I think difficulty 6 for everything except for the newest patch. So no Inferno Rider difficulty 6, but everything else I've completed with my Jingxi and my Jian, and I really enjoyed it. For the very narrow slice of Wuthering Waves that I have been playing, I have enjoyed it, which is just the main story and the holograms. I don't care about Tower of Adversity. I don't care about world exploration, just holograms. Very enjoyable game. If you are a open world fan, if you like Wuthering Waves aesthetic, if you like holograms and difficult boss fights, then Wuthering Waves is the game for you. It is not Genshin Impact, but it does have like the world exploration is like 80% the same, let's be honest. So I just can't be bothered to play another open world game. And Arc Knights I've also dropped because it just takes too much work to log in and do my grind, to do my daily grind. And there's just too many of these gacha games to play at this point for me to focus on all of them. Even just playing the Hoyoverse games is like, I keep on making this excuse for myself that after I finish this event, I'll go make a video. But then when I actually finish the event in one game, then there's another event to do in another game. And once I finish both events, I'm way too tired to like actually make a video. Most of the time I like finish one event and then I'll get halfway through the other event and I'll just be like, oh my God, I'm too tired. I need to do something else with my life. And that's when I just have no motivation at all to make any videos. And that is basically where I'm at. And I have to find like a new schedule for myself so that I don't get too burnt out. And I do feel like even though all these games, they are all gacha games, right? But I do feel like once you get into the minutiae of how the gameplay works, they are all quite different from each other. However, because they are all gacha games, their progression systems are fairly similar to the point where I do think there is enough overlap that if you play more than two gacha games, you are going to get fatigued, you are going to get burnt out. And thankfully for me, that's not the case for the Hoyoverse games at least. So I am keeping up with all the Hoyoverse games except for Honkai Impact Third, and I'm continuing to play them. I am continuing to enjoy them more than I have at any other point during the past 4 years. But the point is, The games industry for gacha games has reached a point of saturation where I don't think I will be covering any future gacha games. Azure Familia, Neverness to Everness, even Hoyoverse games. I feel like Hoyoverse itself is moving away from these big budget gacha titles, or at least the ones that have to do with combat, even like turn-based combat. I don't think they are going to do any more of those for the foreseeable future. If you've been reading the rumors, they're going to do an Animal Crossing game. They're working on a Pokemon like game. Some of those are probably going to be in the same universe or the same IP like Honkai, the Honkai IP or the Genshin IP, but it's not going to be the same as the previous games. They're going to be very different. They're not going to be in the same style as like the current games, right? I think Zenless is probably the last traditional big budget gacha game title that Hoyoverse is going to make. And as for me as well, I think Zenless is also going to be my last gacha game. Um, yeah, I've been having a blast, but there's not really anything like aside from just the saturation of gacha games. I think these gacha games have also converged with each other in terms of how they do things, right? I've talked about how the progression system is fairly similar, but I also think the way that they do content, like the 6 week cycle, as well as the end game content, is also like it's becoming increasingly similar. I feel like the fact that they're adding more end game content to Zenless, the way that they have been doing it with more nodes, more like um, they have improved the Hollow Zero mode by getting rid of the TVs. The TVs, I've said it before, but I like the TVs. However, not Hollow Zero. Hollow Zero TVs, because you do them every single week, they really needed to get rid of them, and they have done that. And now it's just like a traditional roguelike mode, the same as, it's the same as Honkai Star Rail. It's the same as Simulated Universe. And I think that eventually I don't know how they do it in Wuthering Waves because I only care about holograms, but I feel like Wuthering Waves, I've also heard that they have added in a new endgame mode, a permanent one, so it's only a one-time thing, I believe. But I do think that Wuthering Waves will eventually add something else besides Tower of Diversity, and even with just Tower of Diversity and holograms, it's pretty like substantial, right? And in the future, I do think they're also going to add more like boss-oriented endgame modes for Zenless. So it feels all very similar in terms of how they do things. Even Genshin Impact, which has traditionally been like memed as the game that does not improve at all, has added in a new endgame mode. So there's no reason why they can't do that again in the future. Honkai Star Rail as well is adding a new endgame, another simulated universe mode. I feel like at this point they should just stop doing that and add in more like casual mode stuff, casual endgame mode. Endgame mode doesn't have to be just combat, right? It could also be like a Pokemon battling system. It could be like a teapot system. Honkai Star really needs that more than anything else at this point. So there's a lot of things that they could do, but whatever it is that they do, I feel like it has been done in another game, right? Whether or not they add in a new simulated universe mode or a boss rush mode or a harder boss mode, the same as Wuthering Waves, or an improved simulated universe mode, it's all being done. So it does feel a bit samey, and as a result, there's not really much to talk about. I've already said that I don't really enjoy Imaginarium Theater, but I enjoy it enough that I consider it to be a legitimate advancement, a legitimate improvement on the Genshin's formula right now. So everything they have done, nothing is like actually bad. And that's the problem. There's actually nothing bad about these games to talk about. I feel like I've mined all of the drama all of the drama I'm interested in, right? The last time I talked about drama was during the gacha revenue. A new gacha revenue came out this month, and it was pretty much what I expected. There's nothing really interesting to talk about. Like, okay, Zenless Zone Zero revenue is staying stable. Um, Wuthering Waves revenue went down because, of course, they released a free to play character. Like, what else did you expect? And Wuthering Waves was never that popular on mobile in the first place. Genshin remained stable. Honkai Star Rail made relatively more money than it did in the past because we had like 4 banners as well as Fei Xiao, who is super hype. So it's like, yeah, everything's pretty much the same. There's nothing really controversial to talk about. Zenless Zone Zero is going strong, in my opinion. At least when it comes to gameplay content, the revenue, like Zenless Zone Zero making less than Genshin and Honkai Star, is not really like, yeah, that's not really news to me. It's just like, yeah, of course it's going to make less content. It's an instance-based combat arena game. Like, okay, but I'm not really even making excuses for it like I actually said in my last revenue report video that I was not that impressed with Zenless Zone Zero's revenue for the second month. And that remains to be true, but it's also not like dropping off of a cliff. So it's not really like I don't really have anything negative to say about that as well. I really enjoyed 1.2, 1.1 was great as well. The new story was great. So what else is there to say? There is really not much to say. There is not much content that is controversial for me to make unless I really mind like Twitter drama. So those are the three main reasons. I'm lazy. Two, I've been playing a lot of gacha games, so there's not really a lot of time for me in my free time to make these videos. And there's just not that much controversy to talk about. I feel like we have all the gacha games have converged on each other when it comes to how they do things, how they release content. All of them are pretty high budget, pretty well rounded, and the standards for content have remained relatively similar. I think there's like nothing that is like 60 degrees of difference between each other when it comes to content quality. At most, it's like maybe a 20 to 30 degree of difference between Wuthering Waves, Zenless, Honkai Star Rail, and Genshin. All of these games have done relatively similar things with similar like models and templates. So will I continue to talk about gacha games in the future? Of course, but it's not going to be like I talk every single week about, oh my god, somebody raged about Genshin Impact because it didn't have like 10 bajillion wishes, or like Wuthering Waves is dropping off the cliff in terms of revenue. Like, I don't care about that stuff. I don't care if Zenless Zone Zero makes relatively less revenue than Genshin or Honkai Star Rail. I don't care if Honkai Star Rail is making the most money. I don't care if like, oh, Simulated Universe is getting a new endgame content. Huzzah! Genshin could never, like, no, that's not even the case anymore. They have all converged. So what is there left to say? Well, I'm still continuing to enjoy these games. I'll continue to talk about these games when I feel like it, but yeah, it feels like gacha games have become a very stable and very stabilized. Is that a word? Like, it feels like it's become the way that they have done things. It feels like gacha games have become a staple of the free to play industry to the extent where it's just like been there, done that. Um, oh yeah, I'm also going to be leaving for Taiwan in 2 to 3 days. I think it's in like 2 days. It's in 2 days. I'm just thinking, wait a second, do I not even know why I'm leaving for Taiwan? I do. It's in 2 days. Okay. Once I leave for Taiwan, I'm not going to be able to upload like these videos with an overlay of gameplay or whatever, but I am still probably going to be able to just record myself talking while walking around Taiwan, and I'll talk about gacha games then as well. But it's just going to be footage of me on my phone, with very like probably very like staticky sound effects for to my voice because it's just going to my phone recording. And I'll talk about gacha games in Taiwan as well. I'll talk about all the things I usually do, but without any gameplay footage. It'll just be me walking around northern Taiwan for the most part. And I didn't do that the last time I went back to Taiwan, but now that I think about it, it's still possible for me to cover content there. It's just not going to be the way I usually do things. And I feel like I upload so infrequently now that it doesn't really even matter. Like, if I don't upload anything for 3 months, I doubt anybody would even notice me because like all the regulars already react to my community posts anyways. So that's how things are going to go for the next 3 months, and then I'll be back for the 5.3 patch, which is when the main story for Natlan will be ending, and I'll probably live stream that once I finish the main story for myself first. So yeah, this is Bench Gamer signing out. I've been enjoying Polyverse games at least a whole bunch in the past 3 weeks, but there's really not much to talk about. This is Bench Gamer signing out. I'll be seeing you guys probably in maybe like 2 to 3 weeks. Bye bye.